Welcome. Flip the script. It's getting a dose of action with Mr. Asim Arun. This week, we're diving deep into stories with Mr. Asim Arun, a seasoned leader who served as a top cop in India and head of elite security systems. From leading anti-terrorist squads and launching rapid response systems to now a minister in Uttar Pradesh. He's tackling social welfare with the same grit. Tune in to hear about his bold moves, the power of rapid responses, and the drive to bring change, whether on the front lines or in public service. Get ready to rethink resilience and leadership. Welcome, sir. It's our pleasure to have you here.
Thank you
Welcome.
very much. Thank you for having me over. Thank you, Nandan. Thank you, Ramin.
Really happy to have you, sir. And we have a lot of questions about your journey. So, starting off, the very famous UPSC exams that's known to be so challenging and transformative. So, reflecting on your journey of going through that whole process, what do you think is the most significant learning during that period? And looking back today, what would you tell your younger self?
Any exam requires very serious preparation, particularly this exam, UPSC, since the seats are few and the aspirants are in huge numbers. The competition is tough. Secondly, the exam itself is designed in such a way that you need to be smart, you need to have a elephant's memory, and you need to be able to reproduce it in a short span of time in very few words, as each question has a certain word limit. So it's an intensive exam, it's an extensive exam. So whether it's the best exam, I have my doubts. I'm sure that there's lots which can be improved in this exam, but I guess that's not what we're sitting here to discuss. But for anyone who is preparing for this exam, my experience sharing my word of advice would be that this exam cannot be cracked in years preparation or 2 years preparation. One has to begin much in advance. I mean, for example, let's say class 10 or class 11, that's the time where one should begin. And one should begin with studying current affairs, finding different kinds of things which interest you, so that whatever interests you is there in your mind. And you never know what might appear in which exam or which interview or which conversation when. So if your knowledge set is vast, if your ability to produce things on paper or using words orally is good, that will have a very good foundation. So that would be my advice for younger kids if they're watching the podcast. And if you missed it, that's no big issue. You can begin now, and it would not be too late.
Okay, that sounds like some good advice for people who might want to become officers later. But for you, you went on from an IPS officer's role to like a minister of state, and that's kind of a big career shift. How did you approach like the differences in mentality and mindset and the complexity of the roles? And what was the most surprising thing about transition?
Right. I have fundamentally two roles. One as a minister, and before that, one as a member of Legislative Assembly (MLA). So the MLA job is totally new to me, but the minister's job is more like a promotion from heading a project. When I was an IPS officer as head of anti-terrorist squad, or as head of 112, or as police commissioner Kanpur, I was not making policy. I was working under the policy framework made by the government. I was looking up for policy. Sometimes I got it, sometimes I wanted it, but I would not get it. Now I'm in a different role. I have to provide the policy framework to the departments, to the project managers. So that's a change, but that's not a huge change. Being an MLA is a very new concept, new thing to me. Of course, in the police, we interact with citizens in huge numbers in public meetings where we call citizens for stakeholder consultations, or we meet people one to one for problem solving. That I do here again as an MLA, but the approach is now very different. Earlier, I could say that this issue doesn't belong to my department, so please go to the health department for that. But now I cannot say that. Now, as an MLA, I am responsible for all kinds of issues. Particularly as a minister, I'm an MLA who's a minister. I cannot say no to anything. So that has pushed me on a learning curve. I keep repeating more in a humorous sense that मैं तो GD और FIR थाने और चौकी का आदमी हूँ. But now I'm learning things from other departments as well, for which I turn to some officers or local representatives who have some kind of specialization or expertise in that sector, and that helps. So it's interesting, and I think it's good for the grey matter to keep looking for new stuff, learning new stuff, the brain keeps growing that way, I think.
And what would you say are the qualities somebody has to embody while making these shifts to like a new role? And there is flexibility that needs to be there, but what else do you think is important?
That would be a very broad question, but for anyone who's looking for a shift or thinking about a shift, fundamentally, I feel if I look at myself, ever since I was 45 or so, I'm 54 now. So ever since I was 45 or something, I used to keep thinking of an orbital shift. So I was in the orbit of an IPS officer, and everything was going very well. The career was moving well. God was kind. Everything was well sorted out. But often enough, I would feel that I should be doing something new. I should be doing something wider, and I'm sure a lot of people would feel that way. Maybe another word for this is midlife blues if we don't do that. But I guess it's not. It doesn't really apply to people in their 40s. It could apply to youngsters like yourselves also, who are doing something, doing it well, but looking for a change for a variety of reasons. So I would like to share some very interesting experience of mine when this entire episode of my possibility of joining the Bharatiya Janata Party began. So BJP has a very interesting arrangement of scouting talent. So there's one bulk of leaders, workers, who grow within the organization through what is called the Yuva Morcha, and then they move up. Or there's a student doing ABVP, people come up that way. That's and the bulk of leaders will always remain through this channel. But the BJP also has a what I would call a lateral entry program. It scouts for talent, people like me. For example, in present UP Vidhan Sabha, there are about one and a half dozen doctors, MBBS, MS doctors within the BJP, and they've not left their practice. They do their practice every day, and then they do their politics as well. So I was invited to join the BJP under a similar arrangement. When this came to me, first I thought somebody was joking, but then it became serious, so I took it seriously. Eventually, decided. Yes, it was a difficult decision because at the back of my mind, I used to have this thing that I was looking for an orbital change, but not such a huge orbital change. But when this offer came, then I thought, okay, after a lot of deliberation within the family, and the offer was such that I was a cop. I mean, here was the offer to join a political party. I could not discuss with many people. But now coming to the crucial part, which came in a discussion with Honorable CM Yogi Adityanath. He said to me that don't be afraid of taking a risk. No, your career in the police is going well, so your switch to politics will not be very different. Except that in politics, there's a risk. If you're standing for election, there will be 10 or 12 candidates. Only one is going to be able to win. You could be that one, or you could be the one who's losing also. So we have to learn to accept that. And most of us don't take the risk. Let me give you another example. Somebody is working in a company, a small company, let's say, let's look at rural economy. Somebody operates a cold store, and there's a manager who's been working there for 20 years. So he knows everything that the owner also knows. And that manager would very well make a switch and set up his own cold store. But why don't you do that? Because there's a risk. You would have to mortgage your property to get a loan. If it doesn't work out, you lose your parental property also. So people are afraid of taking that risk. Most people would be afraid of taking that risk, but leaders or people who want to bring change to the society, people who want to bring change to themselves, to their families, would take that risk. Since your podcast is about switching, I feel this is the core of the switch. So whether it's business, whether it's a switch to politics, or whether it's a switch from one company to another in the same sector, take a calculated risk. Don't jump off from the 10th floor. Figure out if you can jump from 12 feet and survive, then try 20 feet, then figure out that way. Build your skills and build an action plan. Only then one should attempt a switch. But yes, go for it. Don't be afraid of risks.
I think you have explained the entire concept of pivoting in a very accurate manner for our listeners and also for us, because both me and Ramya, we have often, not often, we have made a very big pivot in our life to be where we are today. And on those lines, we have done research on all the activities that you've done in your life, and one thing that really highlights is the anti-corruption efforts, which is a very
I
deep.
thought we could end the podcast with all that analysis.
So corruption often appears to be, a very deep-rooted and embedded part of a society, which we have been hearing for ages. But you have been a pioneer and a pivotal person in terms of implementing solutions to eradicate corruption from systems. On those lines, what were the greatest obstacles in designing effective anti-corruption frameworks, and how did you work to ensure their integrity across different levels of governance?
Corruption is one of the biggest inefficiencies which exists in our system. If I may use a metaphor of a water tank, so we are taxing people to fill that tank, but there are huge holes in that tank. So, and then there's of course there's a regular pipeline also, which ends up in proper public expenditure. But all the money that we lose because of corruption is inefficiency of the system. We could be doing so much better if we could plug that. That's expenditure side of corruption. Now, coming to the police side of corruption, is it's very different. Police corruption is not making money out of the budget. It's actually fleecing the citizens to fund police budgets. That's what used to be when I was police commissioner Agra. Subsequently, things have improved substantially, which I will talk about shortly. But SHO of a police station was forced to collect money from different kinds of people, from illegal bus operators, drug lords, or hotels doing shady business, and that money would be used for what? For white annual repairs of the building, for putting fuel into the jeep, maintaining the vehicle, buying stationery. At one time, if you bought a prisoner to the havalat, the lockup, the money provided for that, and I'm talking about 2008 or 9, the money provided for one person to be fed through the day was 2.5 rupees. So how do you feed that guy? So you need money. So that was the kind of police corruption we were riddled with. When Yogi ji took over as CM, because he's a man from the ground, he understands these things. He has changed this. I would assume 100%. We have plenty of budgets now in the police. So we have to understand, and the other departments also who have this kind of corruption. But talking about the solution, so many countries have successfully handled anti-corruption campaigns and achieved. We are also doing that. We are fortunate that we have a prime minister who says "Nakaunga or Nakhali." In UP, we are fortunate we have a CM who is a sannyasi. His personal property is absolutely nothing except his clothes. There's no personal property which he owns or which he's eager to acquire. So, in such an environment, we are working on a framework, having dealt with crime successfully. On the same pattern in UP, Yogi ji and the entire ministry is working on cracking down on corruption in a big way. How? One, we have a reporting mechanism. We have a CM helpline called 1076. We have a system called IGRS, Integrated Grievance Redressal System. People can submit their complaints here, including corruption-related complaints. Second part is a decision of who will inquire into what. So this system has that as well. And then finally, we do a inquiry. What is the gap in this? The gap is, and I would request all citizens, one, not to accept money if you're in a government position, not to offer money, not to give money, but then do what? If you goes to any kind of corruption, please get some evidence. And the best evidence is through this device which exists in everyone's hand. Make a video recording discreetly, of course, make a audio recording, and then you can complain anyone, whether it's a politician, whether it's a bureaucrat, whether it's an officer in the department, they are bound to act on that corruption. And if they are fully honest and if they are part of the crackdown ethos, they would be very eager to receive. But if you make a complaint, for example, against a police officer, that this person is not investigating my case properly because I think, I suspect, I believe he has taken money from the other side. Now, an inquiry can be ordered, but what would be the outcome of that inquiry? There will be no evidence, so the inquiry would also be a wasteful exercise. So these are the three areas: a reporting mechanism, a decision making system, and a ground inquiry system, broadly, which are in place, which UB has put in place. And that's why we are able to cut down on corruption. We have to step on the gas, we have to improve the speed because cracking down on crime is quite similar to cracking down on corruption because corruption is also fundamentally another form of crime. But it's far more rampant than violent crime or street crime. You can assume large number of government employees are into it. So there's a large number of people opposing it also, who are stakeholders in that game of corruption. So we, all of us as a country, as a state, we have to focus our energies. We have to become problem-solving agents. The way the government of UP solved crime in Yogi 1.0 government, we're working on corruption similarly. We need all the support from the citizens, as I mentioned earlier. And then I'm sure, as I said, we need to speed up this process. We will do that.
Absolutely. That was really
Hey, we have to pause. There's a error message saying, oh, sorry. Okay, let's begin. Sorry.
So I
Please.
think that was a really great example of how a government has worked towards, anti-corruption, and a lot of it comes probably from policy making and understanding what's happening in the actual like ground level. So moving on to like where you were actually involved in policy making, you've been the person like taking orders and just executing, and now you're in that role of like also making policies. How does this process work? Like, how do you take into consideration like stakeholders? How do you take in public input? Do you take in like the police force and other people's input? How do you ensure everybody's like input is in it and it's something that's actually serving the public for their betterment as well?
Anybody who's looking at policy change, particularly in government, must read this book by Srinandan Nilekani. It's called Rebooting India. It's a small book. In fact, it's a bunch of infographics, very easy to understand what he's trying to say. So he says, let us identify 10 sectors, for example, infrastructure, health, education, etc. And for each sector, let's put a team of 10 people to work on what he calls a transformational exercise. There could be two or three domain experts, a couple of technical experts who can understand what is the latest technology available, how we can use it for a transformative exercise. There should be one or two legal experts who understand the processes. And then there should be some writers who would draft the policy. Beautiful arrangement which he offers them. And I'm trying to follow that arrangement. We have created one transformation team, as I call it, for one of our biggest projects, which is handing over scholarship to children, students. In UP, we hand over scholarships to about 1.05 crore students. Huge number. But there's lots to improve. When I ask Government of India which is the best performing state, they tell us UP is one of the best performing states. I feel happy. But when I talk to students, when I talk to colleges, I realize there's lots of change which is waiting to be done. But as Modiji says, reform, perform, and transform. So reform and perform are necessary, but I would call them tinkering exercises. But transform is you melt something and make something afresh using latest available technologies, latest available business processes, and uh, customizing the entire process to be citizen oriented. Currently, most of our government processes, particularly the older ones, which were created in the British times or in the last century, are not really customer friendly or citizen friendly the way they should be. So now any policy must look at transformation if necessary. Let's not fix things which are not broken. But if it requires a transformation, let us have a systematic approach. Create a team like this. Let this team talk to all the stakeholders. Then have one policy outcome, which could be a draft, send it out for circulation, get comments of all stakeholders, do this iteration 2 or 3 times or more if required, and then have a policy. This exercise may take 3 months, 6 months, but then we would be ready for a complete transformation, a robust transformation, and then we roll out the policy. And even after we roll out the policy, we should learn as we go. So there should be minor or maybe major corrections as we proceed. So that's my approach towards policy making for transformational policy making. That's what Modi ji has done for so many sectors, as you can see. For example, when he began with the Jandhan accounts, very few people could figure out what was happening. But behind, with his own teams, all the research had been done, how it would be rolled out, how the communication would roll out, and eventually how we are going to use it. So, talking about the development sector, which is fundamentally my sector now, social welfare, as PM says, the JAM trinity, Jandhan account, Aadhaar, and mobile governance. Together, these three technical agents have transformed the way we were dealing with governance. As a as a as a system, we've been able to curb corruption hugely in this way. But pilferage kind of corruption, where there's construction to be done and people are taking cuts, that is where we have to make a lot of progress.
Right. Okay.
You know, I think, sir, you have very rightly said the importance of people coming together and sitting down and understanding the importance they bring to the table. On those lines, both me and Ramya, now that we work in the corporate world, we understand the importance of managing relationships across people, across institutions. But we also want our listeners to understand, because not everybody out there is actively interested or participating into understanding governance through a political point of view. So I would like to understand from your perspective in governance, managing relationships across institutions, whether it's police, bureaucrats, or politicians. It's very important. It's a very important cog in the entire system. So, from your experience, what are the most essential principles for building productive and respectful partnerships across these entities to promote effective governance practices?
Right. I call this Sacha Kam and Pakka Kam. So we talked about Sacha Kam. We need to get rid of corruption first. And then we need to do our Pakka Kam, which is perfectionism. Urdu बोलो तो मुकम्मल, हिंदी बोलो तो परिपूर्ण. So any company or a government department which is not perfectionist, and perfection is not something which we will ever achieve. As we
Yeah.
come close to that benchmark, the benchmark shifts or we shift that benchmark further up. But being idealistic and being a perfectionist is something which policymakers certainly need to be. And maybe everybody in the company or everyone in the government departments needs to have that approach. Because of this, we first plug in our inefficiencies, improve our systems, and in government, any bureaucracy, I mean, corporations are also fundamentally bureaucratic organizations. We need to have very strong processes. And that is one area where government, generally governance in India has to improve. Uh, but let me give you a good example. I was heading 112 operations, where police people call the police and the police response in UP. We're able to achieve an average response time of 8 minutes. So in most cases, the first bike or first car would be at the spot in 8 minutes. And that's not because we have a few cops who are very determined, who are very brave, who work 18 hours a day. No, this result is delivered by people who work for 8 hours a day, who have who have family time, who are very normal people. They are not super cops. But we have been able to create a super system which works well. So we began this experiment in a small way when I was SSP of District Aligarh. Then government supported it. We made it grow. Of course, it was not an experiment in the sense because rest of the world was already doing it. But in India, until then, we did not have a phone in every hand. The phone density was so low that 100, the earlier number, existed since 1960s. But the system was not so popular because there were so few phones. But around 2008, when we started this uh, experiment or this transformation, the economy, the society was ready for it. So processes are very important. And I'm not sure about the corporate sector. I would like to know your views on it. But within government, if I have to write a process, I find that people don't know how to write a process. I mean, they would write a kind of an essay and not a process actually. At 112, we also experimented with what is called a visual SOP. We were working with a young team from Pune. They educated us on how SOPs should be written and how visual SOPs should be written. So these are areas where, again, we become perfectionists. We have ordinary citizens like you and me working in a super system, and the super system delivers well. So how is the corporate sector in writing SOPs, developing processes?
So in corporate sector, yes, definitely there is the SOPs are something that we follow on a day-to-day basis. The problem that we face a lot of times, the SOPs are well defined because companies come with a heavy background of what they have been doing for years. The problem is the implementation part, where at some stages, could because of any reason, could be individual reasons, could be technological reasons, could be a transformation that the client is seeking on different levels. There are issues on the implementation level. So what we seek, what excellence we seek, is based on the implementation level, where we can identify those issues and find root and do a root cause analysis of the of not implementing those SOPs. So that's where we face a challenge.
Right, right. Thank you.
So also on the same lines, you have led teams through high stakes, like high pressure environments. In your view, what are qualities are fundamental to effective leadership across both the public and private sectors?
Uh, I can write a book on that, but into a paragraph. I think a person who's in a leadership position, person who's taking decisions, must have the necessary skill set, first of all. For example, if it requires technological tools, the person should be adept. Let me give you an example of a police leader. So if there's a police commissioner of a district, I don't think she or he would ever require to fire a weapon. But this is a very elementary skill which every police officer must have. So, officers of all levels must be experts in these core skills. One, maybe it's mandatory, and second, to earn the respect of somebody you're commanding, you should be able to do that task better than that person. So, if I tell my driver that you're driving the wrong way, this is the way it should be done, it should be possible for me to drive the next time and tell the driver this is how it should be done. So that skill set is crucially important. And then as a leader, one has to keep their ears and eyes open, understand things, have a lot of stakeholder consultation. Again, if I may give an example of the police, because police would, important stakeholders are the cops themselves first, citizens who we serve, other departments who we work with, the media. So if we close our doors to any one of them, then the stethoscope is not working. So we're not able to diagnose the problem in its completeness. And very often when we talk to people, we understand the problem and very often we get the solution also through the same person. And lastly, since this is a brief answer, a leader must always have an arrangement of bottom up communication. There are suggestion schemes, there are different ways, there are different ways of doing it. One could have innovative measures of making it popular. But if your organization has a suggestion scheme, and people are not offering suggestions, then there's something wrong. We're not working at scheme properly. People are not looking at positively. So I guess if we have these core elements in place, any organization is bound to progress.
Okay, that's really interesting. And I think that's very helpful because all of us aspire to go into those leadership roles. And I think there's so much you can actually just take even into, companies and private sector from whatever you've experienced in your career. So, like, what in leadership as well, it's very important to always maintain that ethical lens. And what sort of advice would you give to leaders who are trying to do the right thing but also want to keep like progressing up? And how do you find like how do you make those right choices?
Right. I'll request if this could be the last question or the second last question, because we
Hmm.
have to move to yes. You've raised, I think, the most important question which any individual working in any position would face: ethics. And there are three levels to it. One is the law. Let's look at an example which all of us deal with. We drive on the road. So the law says that you should drive on the left side of the road. But some of us would drive on the wrong side of the road, the right side of the road, because it's a shortcut, it makes easier sense. So why should you do that? Because it's legal. But then there's an issue of morality also. Why should I follow the traffic laws? Because it's logical to do it, it's moral to do it. Because I'm part of a society. If I am disciplined, others are disciplined, then the society works well. If we are indisciplined, the society doesn't work well. And ethics is, I think, fundamentally another word for morality. So we have to have very strong core moral values. And it surprised me. In fact, it shocked me when I discussed corruption issues with people in the private sector. I realized that there is corruption in the private sector as well. People are into pilferage. People are into overbilling within their companies. Whatever you call it, but it's immoral, and we can use the word corruption for that as well. There could be other unethical ways. For example, we are dealing with so many slaughterhouses in UP these days. I mean, slaughterhouses existed for a long time. They are supposedly high tech and they do their things well, but when you do a environmental inspection, you realize things are not right. So, of course, I'm a vegetarian, so for me, it's unethical to kill an animal, but I'm okay with somebody who's non-vegetarian. And there's a huge pink industry which works. I have nothing against it. But if you look at the slaughterhouse, we are ethically responsible for not polluting the environment. We are ethically responsible for dealing with animals the way the law mandates. Uh, One method could be we put a lot of CCTV, we put AI to ensure that people are following the ethics, people are following the law. But I'm sure people will find ways of defeating it. So if it is internalized, if it is part of our system, it's in our heart and it's in our head, then it would be very easy to operate the social systems. So ethics is crucially important for us as ordinary citizens and for us as in different uh, decision making positions we occupy.
And that's very true. And you did also mention how like digitalization is going to help with all of ensuring better ethics. How do you see digital transformation impacting transparency and accountability in public services?
It has already transformed it beyond recognition. It's going to, the speed is going to grow now. The brain chips are already here. So people are saying it's not decades, it's just a matter of years before brain chips are going to be available. So we saw this quantum jump in technology in 90s when we came to internet. So last 30 years have been about this transformation. If you look at brain-computer interface, I thought it will take a few decades, but the first brain implant has already been done and it's working well. So we are at doorsteps of another technological boom. Let's I mean, a lot of people are afraid of it also. Yesterday, I was having a discussion with a very senior retired person, and he was quite worried about driverless cars. What would happen to all the drivers when driverless cars come? And I was trying to explain to him that these technological waves always happen. So people have to reskill themselves. Government has to support them, or people have to skill up in the same sector. So there are different ways of handling it. And yes, certain people, large number of people may actually go jobless because of such a technological change. But we cannot resist technological change. It's a wave. We have to learn to ride the wave. And in India, in recent years, we've done that so successfully. If you look at, for example, flying cars, I mean, they also around the corner. They've been testing in different places. So, as a country, we have to innovate. We have to create a framework, legal statutory framework, which encourages innovation. And as a country, it would be so great. We could be the first country which has a fully operational flying car arrangement. The technology has arrived. We have to just operationalize it. And any country, any civilization who innovates, rides on the wave of technology prospers. Commands. If you go back in history, whether it's military technology, whether it's economics, whoever has the new technology becomes the next.
True that. True that.
I hate to use the word, but superpower.
That's very true. But it was really lovely having you here today and listening to your experiences. And I think Nandan and I also have got quite a bit of things that we can put into our careers. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this for us younger generation. And yeah,
Thank you so much, sir. Means a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amit. Thank you, Nandan. Have a very nice day. Have a great time. Good luck to all of you and to all your viewers. Your podcast is doing very well. I'm sure it will do even better in future. And the kind of incisive stuff that you're doing, it's not none of the men. It's not superficial. It's very in depth. I am sure you will enjoy doing it, and you will have lots of people benefiting from this. So, my best wishes.
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank